Today, Chipotle has nearly 3,000 stores and is planning on doubling that figure in the next few years. Its stock has risen from $42 in 2006 to its current value of over $1,400. It's a chain that prides itself on fresh ingredients and a progressive outlook. In the world of fast food, they're supposed to be the ethical alternative. But how ethical are they? It turns out that in their quest to win the hearts and minds of customers everywhere, they've turned their backs on their own workers. Behind their marketing campaigns about love, justice and fresh food, they've been waging a war against the very people who run their thousands of stores. Now, the evidence is undeniable. It's time to take a look at one of Chipotle's biggest secrets and expose what's really going on. When Chipotle came onto the scene in 1993, it shook up the food industry. Started by a classically trained chef who believed in neutral and ethically sourced ingredients, Chipotle represented a better way of doing fast food. In fact, it wasn't even called fast food. It was fast casual, and they promised to sell burritos with integrity. That promise soon found a hungry audience. Chipotle sold 1,000 burritos in its first month alone, and from 1998 to 2006, the company expanded from 16 to 500 stores. People flocked to Chipotle's as they sprung up around the country, attracted by the idea of a quick filling meal they could feel good about. But not everyone loved them. You see, Chipotle's vocal crusade against the cruelty of factory farming made it an enemy of the agricultural industry. But Chipotle didn't seem to mind. They actually embraced the identity of being a responsible food company. They boasted about antibiotic-free meats and non-GMO ingredients, and they used clever videos to spread that message. But what they didn't mention in those videos was their own employees. One of the biggest complaints that Chipotle workers make throughout the country is the fact that the wages are too low to live on. For years, workers have pushed the company to raise the starting pay to $15 an hour. How has Chipotle responded? Well, in 2021, they finally raised their starting pay to $11 an hour. That's a far cry from the living wage. Compare that to the CEO, who, as of 2020, was making 2,898 times more than the average Chipotle employee. Of course, a company has to make money, especially when there are shareholders involved. But this huge level of disparity is quite hard to stomach, especially when Chipotle's values include, quote, treating our people right. Those values really lose any form of impact or meaning when you come across articles like this one that describes 16 and 17-year-olds having to work over 48 hours a week. Or articles about Chipotle employees being made to work in rat-infested stores. In the case of the rats, the workers were only finally told to stop coming in after a manager was bitten. But believe it or not, even then, their pay was suspended unless they found work at another location. Now, while Chipotle employees have been vocal and tried to shine a light on their situation, the problem they've faced is that Chipotle has made it extremely difficult for them to organise in any meaningful way. Now, that is a very important point, and I'll come back to that shortly. But first, this.
More trouble for Chipotle. The CDC investigating another E. coli outbreak.
In 2015, over 500 people got sick all across the country after eating at Chipotle. It started with an E. coli outbreak in the states of Washington and Oregon. Later that year, 81 people in Minnesota got salmonella poisoning from bad tomatoes, and the cases kept piling up. At Boston College, 141 students got sick with norovirus. That's a highly contagious pathogen that causes vomiting and diarrhea. Eventually, 11 states reported infections. At first, Chipotle tried to brush off the news as isolated cases. They claimed that the CDC, who was investigating the situation, was stirring up public panic. But then, a year later, there was another norovirus outbreak, this time in Virginia. By that time, Chipotle's stock had fallen by 53.2%, and they were even being accused of criminal negligence. So what caused these outbreaks? Well, there were some wild theories being floated around. For example, some Chipotle fans claimed that it was the biotech industry engaging in corporate sabotage as retaliation against Chipotle for their vocal anti-GMO stance. Another, more credible theory, supported by much more evidence, was that these problems could be traced back to Chipotle's supply chain. Now, it turns out that Chipotle's dedication to sourcing fresh ingredients means their supply chain is both more complex and more decentralized than most other fast food restaurants, and that leaves it vulnerable to contamination. The thing is, Chipotle had their own theory. They claimed it was all the fault of their employees. When asked about the 2017 outbreak, Chipotle's founder put the blame on workers who showed up to work while sick. He defended Chipotle's health protocols as being excellent, but mentioned that they're only effective if employees follow them. But that raises a very important question. Why would employees be coming in when sick? Are they just that passionate about building burritos? Well, as you're about to see, that question leads us very nicely onto another big issue. According to numerous Chipotle employees, staff at Chipotle stores often find themselves overworked and understaffed. Managers are incentivized to keep labour costs down. That means less workers on each shift, which in turn means each worker is expected to do more. Under such a high-stressed, overworked situation, it becomes easy to see why safety protocols might not always be followed. As one employee stated, quote, "When a restaurant is short-staffed and the employees are overworked, they have no choice but to cut corners to meet corporate's expectations. That can lead to food safety issues." Now, the Justice Department, having conducted their own independent investigations into the outbreaks, agreed with the employees. As part of their ruling, the Justice Department slapped Chipotle with a $25 million fine, the largest ever food safety related penalty. But that's not all. Chipotle has also agreed to pay a $20 million settlement for repeatedly violating scheduling and sick leave policies. This fine relates to the period between November 2017 to April 2022, in which Chipotle was found to have breached regulations no fewer than 599,693 times. Quote, "Chipotle routinely denied employees requests to use sick time, illegally required employees to find a replacement worker, or took disciplinary action against them for using sick time." In one shocking example of how their conduct affected their employees, one worker was sacked after taking a sick day to care for her unwell father and her daughter, then having to take an additional day off after she became ill. The reason for her dismissal was because she was getting sick too often. Now, that employee eventually got her job back, but only with the assistance of an organisation called 32BJ. 32BJ is a New York City-based union that fights for the rights of service workers. And that brings me to the final way that Chipotle makes life difficult for its employees. You see, by design, they make it nearly impossible for their workers to unionize. Unions help workers by giving them more bargaining power. As a collective organisation, employees can negotiate more effectively with employers for things like pay, more vacation, sick days, and better working conditions. The thing is, Chipotle doesn't want that. When workers in Augusta, Maine tried to form an independent union, Chipotle responded by shutting the store down. Even though the workers had collected enough signatures to hold a union vote, before they could, Chipotle shuttered the store. Now, just to be clear, it's illegal for a company to use store closures as a way of fighting unions. For their part, Chipotle claimed that the shutdown of the store had nothing to do with the petition. Their statement reads, quote, "Because of these ongoing staffing challenges, there is no probability of reopening in the foreseeable future. So we've made the decision to permanently close the restaurant. But things may be changing. You see, over in Lansing, Michigan, one Chipotle has just voted to unionize, making them the first Chipotle to do so. While Chipotle HQ expressed their disappointment at this decision, for the time being at least, the store remains open and there isn't any, quote, staffing challenges. This victory comes after more than 200 Starbucks locations also voted to unionize in the past year, creating what seems like a growing trend in fast food. Will that trend continue? Well, it's hard to say, but maybe Chipotle workers will soon finally get the respect that they deserve.